Facing expensive vitamin C creams with dull results? Olay brightens it up with new Olay Vitamin C. Gives you 2 times, hydrates better than the $400 cream. Shop at Olay.com.
But first, everyone, we have some breaking news to share from Arizona. That is where the state's Democratic Party has just formally censured Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Let's go to NBC's Julie Sirkin, who's going to fill us in on what all of this means. Julie, what do you know about this?
Yeah, so the Arizona Democratic Party actually just met behind closed doors this morning, taking this formal vote to censure her. Of course, they prepared legislation last fall if she were to go against what they say is democracy, if she were not to go forward and vote and do whatever it takes to pass voting rights legislation. They said in part in their statement, quote, "While we take no pleasure in this announcement, the ADP Executive Board has decided to formally censure Senator Sinema as a result of her failure to do whatever it takes to ensure the health of our democracy." Now, I should note that the Democratic Party, after Senator Sinema voted with Republicans against that rules change that would have enabled a simple majority, 51 Democrats, to pass voting rights legislation this week, they issued a strongly worded statement saying they will meet today. They also floated the possibility of taking a vote of no confidence in the senator, saying that they may support a primary challenger to her in 2024. Now, the public version of their meeting is actually set to get underway in the next couple of minutes. There are a lot of members, over 800 in the Arizona Democratic Party, which means we could see on camera a potential vote of no confidence later today. Alex?
Tonight, fire and ice, dangerous weather across the country. A massive Arctic blast set to freeze out millions, while out west, hundreds evacuated as a wildfire bears down on Big Sur. Brink of war. A U.S. shipment of military aid lands in Ukraine as Russian fighter jets arrive in a bordering country, and the possible Russian plot just revealed. Signs of hope. Case numbers plunging in areas hit first by Omicron.
But first, everyone, we have some breaking news to share from Arizona. That is where the state's Democratic Party has just formally censured Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Let's go to NBC's Julie Sirkin, who's going to fill us in on what all of this means. Julie, what do you know about this?
Yeah, so the Arizona Democratic Party actually just met behind closed doors this morning, taking this formal vote to censure.
Democrats are regrouping after failing to pass their landmark voting reform legislation in the Senate on Wednesday. The efforts were stopped short when two Senate Democrats sided with Republicans. In turn, Democrats failed at garnering enough support to make changes to the 60-vote filibuster rule. Democrats Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema joined all 50 Republicans in rejecting the rule change. The in-party divide cost Democrats a chance to advance their voting reforms bill. CBS News' Skylar Henry has more on how Democrats plan to move forward from last night's vote.
President Biden says he'll continue to push for voting rights, even though the legislation failed in the Senate Wednesday night. He said, "I'm profoundly disappointed that the United States Senate has failed to stand up for our democracy. I'm disappointed, but I'm not deterred."
Days are 52, the days are 48.
The bill failed after Democratic Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin refused to sign off on changes to the filibuster rule, which requires 60 votes for legislation to proceed.
The United States Senate has never in 233 years been able to end debate on legislation with a simple majority vote.
Frustration over their actions has prompted some progressives to call for Democrats to target the senators in primary elections, but Senate leadership shot down that suggestion.
I think that's very short-sighted, and I don't want to engage in that conversation. I'm disappointed in the positions they took, but it was entirely within their right to do it. In a 50-50 Senate, we value every member.
Democrats now have to regroup and figure out another way to protect the voting rights of all Americans who are eligible to vote.
Our goal was to remove obstacles of participation. Instead of what the Republicans are doing is to put up obstacles of participation. So the fight for voting rights continues. We will not relent. The fight goes on.
But Republicans remain steadfastly opposed to federal changes to election laws.
This is not a problem. Turnout is up, biggest turnout since 1900. It's simply they're being sold a bill of goods.
Democrats may now try to break up the voting rights legislation into separate bills and pass it piece by piece.
Now, to be clear, Senators Manchin and Sinema both say that they are for voting rights legislation. They just want a more bipartisan approach in order to get the 60 votes that they would need in order to get some sort of legislation passed. Tanya.
Skylar, Senate Democrats knew they lacked enough support to pass either piece of legislation last night. So why did the party move forward with the vote? Was it simply a matter of getting their vote on record?
I think that's actually a good question, Tanya, and I think that might be the answer. We know that Senate Democratic leadership certainly wanted it on record. They're positioning it as saying that they wanted to make sure the world knew, America knew essentially where senators stood as it pertained to voting rights. Now, as I said before, that Senators Manchin and Sinema said they want some sort of legislation along with their Democratic colleagues, but they just weren't for changing the filibuster in order to do so. We know that over the past few weeks, if not months or so, that everyone from the president, from Majority Leader Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi even all have said that they were for possibly changing the filibuster in order to get this measure through. A lot of voting rights advocates actually question the timing of it all, particularly it being around the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday this past Monday, so much so that they expressed their frustration given the timing and knowing that this bill would, quote unquote, was likely to fail. And so I think that it was more so of a getting it on the record sort of thing. How they want to move forward with all of that, that remains to be seen.
Skylar Henry on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Got it.
Drinking water before bed burns 46 pounds in 2 weeks. If you are struggling to lose weight and you're over 25, then you need to hear this. People are burning
each 50 minutes long. We'll explore 3 topic areas tonight: achieving prosperity, America's direction, and securing America. At the start of each segment, I will ask the same lead-off question to both candidates, and they will each have up to 2 minutes to respond. From that point until the end of the segment, we'll have an open discussion. The questions are mine and have not been shared with the commission or the campaigns. The audience here in the room has agreed to remain silent so that we can focus on what the candidates are saying. I will invite you to applaud, however, at this moment as we welcome the candidates. Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Hillary Clinton, and Republican nominee for President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Issues of this campaign tonight, but I remind everyone there are two more presidential debates scheduled. We are going to focus on many of the issues that voters tell us are most important, and we're going to press for specifics. I am honored to have this role, but this evening belongs to the candidates and just as important to the American people. Candidates, we look forward to hearing you articulate your policies and your positions, as well as your visions and your values. So, let's begin. We're calling this opening segment Achieving Prosperity, and central to that is jobs. There are two economic realities in America today. There's been a record 6 straight years of job growth, and new census numbers show incomes have increased at a record rate after years of stagnation. However, income inequality remains significant, and nearly half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Beginning with you, Secretary Clinton, why are you a better choice than your opponent to create the kinds of jobs that will put more money into the pockets of American workers?
Well, thank you, Lester, and thanks to Hofstra for hosting us. The central question in this election is really what kind of country we want to be and what kind of future we'll build together. Today is my granddaughter's 2nd birthday, so I think about this a lot. First, we have to build an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top. That means we need new jobs, good jobs, with rising incomes. I want us to invest in you. I want us to invest in your future. That means jobs in infrastructure, in advanced manufacturing, in innovation and technology, clean renewable energy, and small business, because most of the new jobs will come from small business. We also have to make the economy fair. That starts with raising the national minimum wage and also guarantee, finally, equal pay for women's work. I also want to see more companies do profit sharing. If you help create the profits, you should be able to share in them, not just the executives at the top. And I want us to do more to support people who are struggling to balance family and work. I've heard from so many of you about the difficult choices you face and the stresses that you're under. So let's have paid family leave, earned sick days. Let's be sure we have affordable childcare and debt-free college. How are we going to do it?
It really doesn't work. It really doesn't. Now, as far as the lawsuit, yes, when I was very young, I went into my father's company, had a real estate company in Brooklyn and Queens, and we, along with many, many other companies throughout the country, it was a federal lawsuit, were sued. It really doesn't work. It really doesn't. Now, as far as the lawsuit, yes, when I was very young, I went into my father's company, had a real estate company in Brooklyn and Queens, and we, along with many, many other companies throughout the country, it was a federal lawsuit, were sued. We settled the suit with no admission of guilt. It was very easy to do, but they sued many people. I notice you bring that up a lot, and I also notice the very nasty commercials that you do on me in so many different ways, which I don't do on you. Maybe I'm trying to save the money, but frankly, I look at that and I say, isn't that amazing? Because I settled that lawsuit with no admission of guilt. But that was a lawsuit brought against many real estate firms, and it's just one of those things. I'll go on one step further. In Palm Beach, Florida, tough community, a brilliant community, a wealthy community, probably the wealthiest community there is in the world. I opened a club and really got great credit for it. No discrimination against African Americans, against Muslims, against anybody. And it's a tremendously successful club, and I'm so glad I did it. And I have been given great credit for what I did, and I'm very, very proud of it. And that that's the way I feel. That is the true way I feel.
Our next segment is called Securing America. We want to start with a 21st century war happening every day in this country. Our institutions are under cyber attack and our secrets are being stolen. So my question is, who's behind it and how do we fight it? Secretary Clinton, this answer goes to you.
Well, I think cybersecurity, cyber warfare will be one of the biggest challenges facing the next president because clearly we're faced.
But if somebody, and I'll ask the press, if somebody would call up Sean Hannity, this was before the war started, he and I used to have arguments about the war. I said it's a terrible and a stupid thing. It's going to destabilize the Middle East, and that's exactly what it's done. It's been a disaster.
My reference was to what you had said in 2002, and my question was, why is your judgment any different than Mrs. Clinton?
Well, I have much better judgment than she does. There's no question about that. I also have a much better temperament than she has. You know, I have a much better. She spent, let me tell you, she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on an advertising. You know, they get Madison Avenue into a room, they put in, oh, temperament, let's go after. I think my strongest asset, maybe by far, is my temperament. I have a winning temperament. I know how to win. She does not have.
Secretary Clinton.
Wait, the AFL-CIO the other day, behind the blue screen, I don't know who you were talking to, Secretary Clinton, but you were totally out of control. I said, there's a person with a temperament that's got a problem.
Secretary Clinton.
Whoa, okay. Well, as soon as he travels to 112 countries and negotiates a peace deal, it's not about us so much as it is about you and your families.
We covered a lot of ground, not everything, as I suspected we wouldn't. The next presidential debates are scheduled for October 9th at Washington University in St. Louis and October 19th at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. The conversation will continue. A reminder, the vice presidential debate is scheduled for October 4th at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. My thanks to Hillary Clinton and to Donald Trump and to Hofstra University for hosting us tonight. Good night, everyone. Hey, NBC News fan.
If you have a utility meter like this on the side of your house, you could get paid to go solar for no...
And the questions in each topic, I can assure you, none of the questions has been shared with the commission or the two candidates. This debate is being conducted under health and safety protocols designed by the Cleveland Clinic, which is serving as the health security advisor to the commission for all four debates. As a precaution, both campaigns have agreed that candidates will not shake hands at the beginning of tonight's debate. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, no boos or other interruptions, so we, and more importantly you, can focus on what the candidates have to say. No noise except right now, as we welcome the Republican nominee, President Trump, and the Democratic nominee, Vice President Biden. Gentlemen, a lot of people have been waiting for this night, so let's get going. Our first subject is the Supreme Court. The Constitution is clear about your obligation and the Senate's to consider a nominee to the court. Vice President Biden, you say that this is an effort by the president and Republicans to jam through an appointment and what you call an abuse of power. My first question to both of you tonight: why are you right in the argument you make and your opponent wrong? And where do you think a Justice Barrett would take the court? President Trump, in this first segment, you go first. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris. I will tell you very simply, we won the election. Elections have consequences. We have the Senate, we have the White House, and we have a phenomenal nominee, respected by all, top academic, good in every way, In fact, he stood up.
No, the answer to the question is no.
Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion,
if
that is
you know what, you're not true. You're going to have true, gentlemen. I hate to raise my voice, but it seems to me, why should I be different than the two of you? So here's the deal. We have 6 segments. We have ended that segment. We're going to go to the next segment. In that segment, you each are going to have 2 uninterrupted moments. In those 2 uninterrupted minutes, Mr. President, you can say anything you want. I'm going to ask a question about race, but if you want to answer about something else, go ahead. But I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting.
Oh, that's all right, but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less than,
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on. The issue of race. Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville 3 years ago, when he talked about very fine people on both sides, was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
Oh, yeah, sure.
President Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for Black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the 2 of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years? Vice President Biden, you go first.
It's about equity and equality. It's about decency. It's about the Constitution. And we have never walked away from trying to require equity for everyone, equality for the whole of America. But we've never accomplished it. But we've never walked away from jobs, creating millions of good paying jobs, not $15 an hour, but prevailing wage, by having a new infrastructure that in fact is green. And the first thing I will do, I will rejoin the
2 minutes is 2 minutes.
All run by Democrats.
President Trump,
it's a rigged election.
you're going to be able to continue. You have been charging for months that mail-in balloting is going to be a disaster. You say it's rigged, that it's going to lead to fraud. But in 2018, in the last midterm election, 31 million people voted mail-in voting. That was a quarter, more than a quarter of all the voters that year cast their ballots by mail. Now that millions of mail-in ballots have gone out, what are you going to do about it? And are you counting on the Supreme Court, including a Justice Barrett, to settle any dispute?
Yeah, I think I'm counting on them to look at the ballots, definitely. I hope we don't need them in terms of the election itself. But for the ballots, I think so. Because what's happening is incredible. I read today, where at least 1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated. They take them, we don't like them.
But what are you going to do about it if there are millions of ballots going out right now?
What you do is you go and vote. You do a solicited ballot, and that's okay, or you go and vote.
I'm asking you about the fact that millions of people...
You go and vote. You go and vote.
Like they used to in the millions of people.
You either do, Chris, a solicited ballot where you're sending it in, they're sending it back, and you're sending... They have mailmen with lots of it. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well. This is...
Our next speaker, first known as the entrepreneur of the personal computer revolution, was named by Time magazine as one of the 100 people who most influenced the 20th century, as well as one of the 100 most influential people of 2004, 2005, 2006, and again in 2007. Just think what you could have achieved if you had stayed here another 2 years. He enrolled at Harvard in the fall of 1973, keenly interested in computer science, but without a definite study plan. In between intense poker games at Radcliffe, he met his future business partner, Steve Ballmer, and he developed a version of the programming language BASIC for the first microcomputer, and co-authored and published a paper on algorithms with computer scientist Christos Papadimitriou. Our speaker is a person of many talents. A close friend in college amusingly recalls seeing him doze off during the prestigious Putnam math exam. Despite this napping, he scored remarkably well. In his junior year, he took a leave of absence from Harvard to devote his energies to Microsoft, a company he had begun in 1975 with his friend Paul Allen. Since 2000, he has begun to concentrate on a number of philanthropic endeavors, making extraordinary donations to various charitable organizations and scientific research programs around the world through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. After a 33-year leave of absence from his alma mater, I am pleased to present to you Dr. William Gates.
Thank you. President Bonk, former President Rudenstein, incoming President Faust, members of the Harvard Corporation and the Board of Overseers, members of the faculty, parents, and especially the graduates. I've been waiting more than 30 years to say this. Dad, I always told you I'd come back and get my degree. I want to thank Harvard for this honor. I'll be changing my job next year, and it will be nice to finally have a college degree on my resume. I applaud the graduates for taking a much more direct route to your degrees. For my part, I'm just happy that the Crimson called me Harvard's most successful dropout. I guess that makes me valedictorian of my own special class. I did the best of everyone who failed. But I also want to be recognized as the guy who got Steve Ballmer to drop out of business school. I'm a bad influence. That's why I was invited to speak at your graduation. If I'd spoken at your orientation, fewer of you might be here today. Harvard was was a phenomenal experience for me. Academic life was fascinating. I used to sit in on lots of classes that I hadn't even signed up for. And dorm life was terrific. I lived up at Radcliffe in Courier House. There were always a lot of people in my dorm room late at night discussing things because everyone knew that I didn't worry about getting up in the morning. That's how I came to be the leader of the antisocial group. We clung to each other as a way of validating our rejection of all those social people. Radcliffe was a great place to live. There were more women up there, and most of the guys were math science types. The combination offered me the best odds, if you know what I mean. That's where I learned the sad lesson that improving your odds doesn't guarantee success. One of my biggest memories of Harvard came in January 1975 when I made a call from Courier House to a company in Albuquerque, New Mexico that had begun making the world's first personal computer. I offered to sell them software. I worried they would realize I was just a student in a dorm and hang up on me. Instead, they said, "We're not quite ready. Come see us in a month." It was a good thing, because we haven't written the software yet. From that moment, I worked day and night on an extra credit project that marked the end of my college education and the beginning of a remarkable journey with Microsoft. What I remember above all about Harvard is being in the midst of so much energy and intelligence. It would be exhilarating, intimidating, sometimes discouraging, but always challenging. It was an amazing privilege. And though I left early, I was transformed by my years at Harvard, the friendships I made, and the ideas I took on. But taking a serious look back, I do have one big regret. I left Harvard with no real awareness of the awful inequities in the world, the appalling disparities of health and wealth and opportunity that condemn millions of people to lives of despair. I learned a lot here at Harvard about new ideas in economics and policy. Politics. I got great exposure to the advances being made in the sciences. But humanity's greatest advances are not in its discoveries, but in how those discoveries are applied to reduce inequity.